such a pleasure to start the day here with two Congress representatives, Congressman Bill Foster and Congresswoman Valerie Foushee. And welcome to this fireside chat where we will talk about USA leadership and AI. What does winning mean? And they'll provide us their views from Congress. So let's get started and welcome. We're so honored to have you here on this wonderful day.
Happy to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. So thinking of what does leadership mean? What does AI mean in all of these wonderful but maybe overwhelming developments that we're seeing in all the industries and all of our human activities? And where does regulation come into play, and how can leaders and decision makers really define the strength of this country as it historically has been a leader in innovation? So starting with Congressman Bill, as the only PhD physicist in Congress, what is your approach to advancing science and technology in the USA?
Well, that's a very large question. I should say a little bit about myself here. I'm Congress's only PhD physicist. For 25 years, before coming to Congress, we were smashing protons and antiprotons together to make particles that haven't been around since the Big Bang. I was actually on the team that discovered what's called the top quark, the heaviest known form of matter, a single subatomic particle that weighs more than an atom of gold. And actually, if you fly into O'Hare from the west, you'll see these two giant rings, and in one of those rings is where we discovered the top quark. The other one contains a particle accelerator that I invented and led the teams that built it. So that's what I did. But actually, I started out in business. When I was 19, my little brother and I started a company that makes most of the theater lighting equipment in the United States, called Electronic Theater Controls. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the lights in here are at least partly from our company. So electronic theater controls. So that's sort of where I come from. But I first programmed neural networks back in the 1990s. They're the technology at the core of artificial intelligence. And we were trying to separate different types of subatomic particles from each other, and it wasn't ready for prime time. Then I next encountered artificial intelligence. I entered Congress in 2008 and then lost in the Tea Party wave, which was a big election, if you remember. I think 63 Democrats lost. But then if you lose an election, you say, okay, what do I do with the rest of my life? And my number two thing on the list that I made for myself was to use neural networks and artificial intelligence to make an AI tutor, which, back in 2010, it was before you really had the breakthroughs in artificial intelligence, and so it really wasn't working. So I downloaded these motion recognition software kits, and they were not ready for prime time, and I said, okay, maybe this will work in another 15 years, which is kind of what happened. But I returned to Congress, and I've been in Congress since then. The way I think about innovation is that the big job of Congress is to try to skate to where the puck's going to be. That this is something where you can sort of see, in artificial intelligence, the rate of change is just sort of blindingly fast. And right now, my guess as to what the next big things in AI are going to be the AI agents. And from the point of view of the producers of AI, you're going to have regenerative self-improvement. So you're going to have an AI write a next version of itself. And that's going to work very quickly. The estimates are probably within a year or two, which I kind of believe. I still do a little bit of computer coding just to keep my brain from rotting. And so so I've been watching these AI coding assistants, and the rate of progress of those has just been breathtaking. Maybe 3 years ago it was sort of primitive autocomplete. A couple of years ago, you'd get halfway through writing your subroutine and it would complete your subroutine, and now you just sort of describe the package you want, and it will just write the whole thing and test it for you before you even see it. And so this next step that we're not too far away from is simply saying, hey, Mr. AI, write an improved version of yourself. And if you have a clean definition of what's improved, like write something that will get a better score on a math exam, that's a well-defined question, and that there's going to be very rapid progress. And we're almost to the point now where you have theorem proving, mathematicians, AI mathematicians that are right at the edge of what's possible with the best human mathematicians. That can have really important near-term implications for things like breaking crypto. Because if you know, there's a lot of anxiety about quantum breaking crypto, which is a real threat, and we don't really know how far away that is, anywhere between 3 and infinite years. But if you look at the attempts to make post-quantum crypto, NIST went out and came up with 4 candidate algorithms, and 2 of those were very promptly broken, not with quantum, just by mathematicians. That people understood that a very small number of mathematicians understood the very specialized mathematics in these post-quantum algorithms, and the few that did said, oh, that's interesting, and very promptly broke it. So now if you're in a situation where you have an infinite number of the best mathematicians on Earth in the form of an AI mathematician, that I think is a bigger threat to breaking crypto than actually quantum in the near term. Anyway, so that's one of the things I'm really keeping my eyes on. The other thing that I really think is going to change everything is the business of having AI agents. What that means is any consumer-facing operation, you're going to be interacting not with a customer directly, but with a customer's agent. So, for example, when let's say you want to buy a used car, all right, what will happen is you'll say, hey, Mr. AI agent, go out and I want to buy a used car, and it will go and scan the inventories of all the nearby dealerships, and then it'll say, okay, it will negotiate the best and final price with AIs from all those dealerships and present you with a few options. And then when you've decided, then the dealer that you've chosen will try to steer you into some crappy overpriced loan, which at least in Illinois, that's a big part of the business model of a lot of used car dealerships. They often make more money on the loan than the car. And so that these are, and then your AI will say, thank you, but I've looked out on the internet, there's a better loan available elsewhere. And so what this is going to do is squeeze the profit margin out of every consumer-facing thing, and it will completely change the game for regulation as well. You're not going to have any clueless customers anymore. Every customer will have, the best financial advisor that's ever existed in their pocket for free. And so that anything that depends on customer loyalty or tricking the customer will be a losing game. And so it's going to change everything. There are going to be waves of bankruptcies from companies that depend on customer loyalty. And it's also going to, and I'll turn it over to Valerie in a moment, one of the things that we all struggle with is the whole business of making this thing fair and unbiased and everything else. I think that's going to be easier. Because, for example, one of the things we've done forever with the problem with real estate agents steering people into neighborhoods in racially discriminated ways, the way to test that is with testing. And that's very expensive if you have to have humans do it. But if you test it by an AI agent and you find that's happening, you can get statistics at scale and know that this sort of abusive practice is happening. Yeah. So it's going to make a lot of regulations simpler. And even if you have to comply with a big long list of regulations that would horrify a person, if you can just have your AI say, hey, Mr. AI, are we compliant with this? And it will look through, read all the fine print, and give you a clean yes or no. It's going to be tolerable to have very complicated regulations because the act of complying that will become simpler. Anyway, I've said a lot there, and I'm happy to turn it back to our...
Wow, that is fascinating. So much insight in a couple of minutes. Moving on to Congresswoman Foushee, you've been so involved in so many social issues and issues in the economy and so many different themes that really mark America as what it is. What are your priorities to advance U.S. leadership in AI? And also, how do you see AI advancing U.S. leadership in other aspects of the economy, like healthcare, education, legal access, jobs?
So thank you for that question. And indeed, I do believe that we have the opportunity here as a country to stay ahead of the game as it relates to AI. And in those respects of ensuring that we are using AI for research, for education, for workforce development, and to ensure that indeed we stay as leaders in the world as it relates to artificial intelligence. But at the same time, I do believe that we need to make sure that as we move along, that we are putting guardrails in place to make sure that we are protecting people's civil rights and their civil liberties. I think that we already know that there are systems where algorithms have been used to, in some cases, to people's disadvantage. We know that there's opportunities for advancing healthcare, for using AI to complement the skills that workers already have, but we have to make sure that people's rights are not infringed upon, that they are not being considered for eligibility for admissions into colleges or universities, that they are not being disadvantaged as it relates to getting home mortgages. There are lots of ways that we can ensure that we are enhancing the quality of life of our constituents, of citizens, but there's also the need to make sure that we are protecting those rights at the same time. In order for our country to stay at the forefront, though, we have to make sure that we are investing, that we are indeed creating the partnerships between government and private enterprise to make sure that there is an infusion of not just regulations, but that there is funding to help advance that research. There's funding to help advance the opportunity to make things better for most, if not all Americans on a regular basis. I think what we also know is that the diffusion of these capabilities have already created a wedge such that income inequality has elevated. But that does not have to be the case. There are opportunities to make sure that AI is not being used to displace workers, even workers who are making the highest incomes, because what I believe will happen is that in those spaces where you are displacing workers, even at the high end, that means that those workers are going to be competing for jobs with other lower wage workers. And so what you have created in that situation is not the outcome that we're looking for. So those are my first thoughts on that question.
Yeah, it's not a simple answer necessarily. And moving to Representative Foster, what do you think is the best way, as Representative Foushee mentioned, to advance investment in R&D, but in a way that would promote trustworthy and compliant AI that will actually make the world a better place?
Yeah. Well, I think that there a lot of effort should be going into using AI for monitoring compliance and for generating the software that you need to ensure compliance. That, for example, if you want to open, a fintech or a small bank or something like this, one of your biggest costs is setting up a whole KYC operation, just getting all the registration form. You can literally tell an AI to do that right now, and it will give you a pretty good first cut at that. So the cost of a lot of this is going to go way down. It's sort of like, right now there are, thousands of new coins being spun up, and probably every day, and that used to be a big deal to do that. And now there are packages that just do that for you. So, script kiddies can spin up new coins and so on. And so you're going to be in a similar situation where if you want to spin up a bank, here is, you just, somebody will generate a lot of that for you. And at the same time, it will be affordable to do a lot of the compliance, make sure you're in compliance with capital rules and everything else, and make sure you're, appropriate if you're depending on your line of business, that you're appropriately segregating customer funds from personal funds, which turns out is a problem in all kinds of financial industry. That can be done in an automated way with very complicated software that you don't have to deal with the costs of that complexity. And that's one of the things that I think that's really going to change things. It will be easier to start, and it'll be true for very complicated business, like, I don't know, a crypto exchange, or very simple ones. If you just, you can go to an AI right now and say, I want to open up a donut shop in Morris, Illinois. And it will say, okay, here's the market research, here's all the competing donut shops that nearby, here's an estimate of the foot traffic, here's here is your cash flow, here's how much money you're going to have to front to start your business. And then if you give it permission, it'll look at your how much equity you have in your mortgage and see if you can reasonably get a loan to start your donut shop. And then finally give you advice on whether or not, this is really not a viable business. And so you're going to have, everyone is going to have in their pocket like the best business advisor that's ever been existed. And there's worry that Valerie mentioned about that this is going to either aggravate the wealth disparities or it's going to compress it. And that's a sort of raging debate. One of the things that strikes me in this debate is there's this incredible fact that if you're a billionaire, you cannot get a better iPhone, which is an incredible fact about the digital economy, and you cannot get a better Wikipedia. And that used to be a big thing. When I was a kid, if you were wealthy, your parents got you Encyclopedia Britannica, and not so wealthy, you get World Book, and less wealthy than that, you'd have to walk to the library. And now everyone has in their pocket for free the best encyclopedia that's ever been made, and we're going to soon have the best legal team that's ever been assembled in our pocket for free. So if you ever get in a legal fight with a billionaire, he or she is not going to be able to buy a better set of lawyers than you already have essentially for free. And so that sort of thing will be leveling, but there's also a real worry that about what the heck the jobs left over for humans are going to be. And when you figure that one out, please let me know.
There's a beautiful sense of democratization and equal access that you mentioned through technological advancements. Yet still questions to be addressed when we talk about inequalities and social issues, challenges and unanswered questions about potential dangers, right? Moving to Representative Foushee, how do you think regulators, policymakers, and any other stakeholders should come together to collaborate through committees, through formal or informal ways of discussion, forums, to address these challenges posed by AI and ensure positive outcomes for AI adoption?
Well, first, let me just say that I was proud to be a member of the bipartisan AI task force on which I served along with Representative Foster. And what happened over the course of several months was that we had the opportunity to hear from experts from the medical field, from academia, from the legal field, all giving us expert advice on how we should move forward in making policy that would not only keep America at the forefront, but that we would have policies that would ensure that we were advancing, that we were making sure that we were protecting the rights of American citizens. We know that for a lot of citizens, AI is scary. And so we don't want people to be afraid of it. We want people to understand that it is an opportunity to advance, to make things better. But that's something that has to continue. We were not successful in having those recommendations, that final report, to go further. The task force is not operating now. So to take away the opportunities to continue the conversations to make sure that we are putting policies in place that will help other local government bodies, to make sure that private industry understands its role, those conversations have to continue. And any opportunity to be in spaces where we have the greatest minds, we have people who understand how we work to advance healthcare and education, and all of those aspects of everyday life must continue. So I'm hoping that there is opportunity at the congressional level to move forward so that we can indeed put a framework in place for which people can move further and getting to the nuts and bolts of what is going to best serve our public.
Then what kind of rules should be established as we talk through continued engagement, education, collaboration, and increased understanding of these new innovations? To Representative Foster, how do you see the value of adopting a scientific perspective, or even the role of adoption of standards for the right approach to technologies, emerging technologies like AI, in convergence with other emerging technologies as well?
Yeah, I think that one of the main roles of government is to establish technical standards and transparency standards, so that, for example, in this world that I described briefly where everyone is represented by an AI agent, when your AI agent connects to another AI agent, you ought to negotiate all the privacy standards. Like if you're going to say, I want to apply for a loan, and then your AI agent say, okay, I will turn over this information. I want you to use it for the purposes of giving me a loan or not, or figuring out what the interest rate, and then I want you to promise to destroy that information when you're done with the response. And so negotiating all that privacy, or they'll say, well, if you let me keep the data, I'll give you $5, or whatever the deal is. All of that, this is the scroll down and hit I accept problem. Our brains are not big enough for that, and we're being abused. But that is, and so that isn't the way forward. The way forward is to have your personal AI read all the fine print, scroll down, and then if they agree with it, it's fine. They'll accept it on your behalf, and that's a very high trust activity. And when your AI goes and actually buys a car on your behalf, you have to make sure that you've handled the identity right, that your AI somehow is carrying certificates that show I am operating on the behalf of Bill Foster, and I am authorized to spend up to $30,000 on a used car. And so that all of that has to be and ought to be negotiated ahead of time under the hood by these AIs. The technical standards for that are already emerging. I think it's Anthropic that's the lead organization on this MCP, the Model Context Protocol, that seems to be the way that all these agents will talk to each other. But so first off, they should be standardized by groups like NIST so that we actually have standards and it works, internationally. And secondly, there are principles like privacy that have to be negotiated and understood so that it all happens automatically, because we're not going to sit there and scroll down and hit I accept every time your agent connects to another agent. And so the technical standards there, which are in process of being developed, I think will be a crucial area for government to get involved.
Yes, standards and principles, so important to establish common rules of the game for a technology to work and for scaling, right? So a final question, we only have time for one more, to Representative Foushee. What advice would you give to the general public where to seek AI educational resources and how to approach job transitions where people may embrace AI as a tool to make their tasks better as opposed to replacing their tasks?
Thank you for that. And very briefly, I will say that I am proud to represent a district where we are on the forefront of researching and developing these technologies. In my district, we have two NSF-funded AI institutes. One is the Athena Institute that's led by Duke University, and the other is the AI Institute for Engaged Learning, which is a partnership between North Carolina State and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. In addition to that, we also have the Institute for Artificial Intelligence and Emerging Research at North Carolina Central University. All three of these are universities that are doing the work right now that is providing opportunities for research, opportunities for STEM education to make sure that we are at the same time raising the next generation of AI researchers, to make sure that, again, we stay on top and that we are making sure that we are putting these technologies in place to enhance everyday life and not to infringe on people's rights, to make people afraid that something is coming after them. But indeed, this is an opportunity for better health care. This is an opportunity for better research, better education, and better workforce development.
Well, wonderful. And thank you again to both Congressman Bill Foster and Congresswoman Valerie Foushee for this wonderful conversation, for sharing your meaningful insights and really showing us how this country is taking tangible steps toward AI leadership. And we will continue to follow your work ahead and wish you the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.